Welcome back to another episode of On the Floor with Dr. Terra DeFoe and our special guests today are Minister Troy Muhammad of Mosque number 1 here in Detroit and Pastor Kevin Harris here in Detroit. So today, I want to just touch on, we keep hearing a lot about mass incarceration. And some people, kind of have an idea of what it is, but for two individuals who have not only experienced but have worked with the community of returning citizens, what do you say a clear definition of mass incarceration is?
I mean, I don't have a definition. I can tell you what I saw when I was incarcerated. I went in prison, unfortunately, when I was 17 years old. And I had 25 to 50 years, and I was sent to a facility where everybody there was between the ages of 16 and 21, and they all had over 15 years to do.
Wow.
And it was like, man, I was running into guys I hadn't seen since elementary school, like,
so everybody just disappeared and went there.
Right, and I mean, it was just jam-packed, and it was that age group, and you saw teenagers with all this time to do. The educational system in the prison system wasn't as that strong either. So it was just young men being warehoused, and then you can see on a larger scale how the families had to pay these phone bills, how the cost of going to visit these young men. So you can see how this mass incarceration was really a big money grab too. It was a business.
Right.
So I think the mass incarceration is combined with that. And what I wrote down earlier was based upon the 13th Amendment, where slavery was abolished in 1865, but it was abolished with the exception of punishment for a crime.
Right.
So it was a mindset tied to that abolishment of slavery, and the mindset was, okay, if it's a crime, we can put them in slavery again, and continue to make money and profit off of them. And if you go through the prison system and you look at every layer of it, you'll see the profit aspect of it too. And I think that is what mass incarceration is about, because you have people in there with low-level crimes, the drug crimes and things like that, serving large amounts of time.
Pastor Harris, you have people that kind of sit on both sides of the table, right? You have people who say if you do the crime, you got to do the time. As a faith-based leader in the community, how do you manage to have the conversation around mass incarceration?
Well, for me, it's interesting because even being in the ministry and being in the church and being a pastor of a Baptist church, I'm one who, I kind of say all the time that I have a Jesus John the Baptist ministry. I kind of came from outside of the church to now sit in the leadership of the church. And being that I had personal experience with the system since I was a kid, I was always getting in trouble growing up. So I have a complete different perspective of it than what you probably would have a lot of leaders and church leaders, because I came up through the system and I had my Paul on Damascus Road experience to where I was able to turn my life around. I like to say, my Malcolm X minus the Islam experience.
Right.
So I come from it from a different perspective. And, when you look at, a lot of people, they may feel and they look at incarceration as you did the crime, so do the time. I look at it from a different standpoint in terms of the over-incarceration of our community, the targeting of our community with the drug war. The war on drugs was really a war on young black men. I look at it from the perspective of the school to prison pipeline, and for all of those of us who live in the city of Detroit and move around the city of Detroit, you can go around and that it's probably hundreds of dilapidated schools.
And that's one of the things that a lot of people they miss that key point.
Right.
You can watch. When I was growing up, we had the swim mobile that came down our block. Everybody jumped in the swim mobile, and we had a good time. We went to the recreation center, but then as time went on, rec centers was closing. Who would have thought, some of the high schools start closing. I mean, Rufford High School is now a Myers. And you have this happening in communities where children have to take a bus, almost 10 miles away
Absolutely.
from their home. And so how do you have this conversation with elected officials, with community leaders, and not address the fact that you're taking away key things that keep men and young women off the street where we had something to do, and now you replace it with what?
Well, it's not just the rec centers and the educational institutions, but poverty.
Yes.
I mean, you're minutes away from Southfield. Majority black, but the
Yes.
crime rate is nowhere near what you see in Detroit.
Right.
You 30, 40 minutes from Grosse Isle. That's the lowest crime rate area in the country, and we're right in the same vicinity.
Right.
So you can look at that and you can see how poverty is tied to criminal activity. So when jobs are lost and jobs are taken out, that has a major impact
Yes.
on a community, and that's where you see the unfairness, because you have people starting off. I remember a Tupac song, if I can quote that, but the guy on the song, he says, somebody has to explain to me why I don't have nothing.
Yes.
Because he's being born into it.
Yes.
And he's being born into a society where he's in a project, but he's seeing his counterpart, living in Bloomfield Hills or something like that. It's not his fault. That's what he was born into.
Exactly.
But the poverty has a direct effect and link on crime. If we can create jobs, then the crime rate goes down. So you have to be able to attract jobs into a community. And when you're incarcerating people based upon the lack of jobs and the lack of income, that's where the disparity comes
Right,
in. And you have
absolutely.
more poor blacks, Hispanics, poor whites in prisons than you have anywhere.
Do you find that some of the policies are adding to the problem, where we had driver's responsibility fees, which was, to me, was one of the highest fundraisers for the state of Michigan. If you were caught driving without insurance or caught driving without a license or whatever the violation was, you used to be able to just pay whatever the violation was and you were done with it. But then they tacked on this driver's responsibility fee, which could, run up to $2,000 to $5,000, which then put a person, set a person back, or it took away their ability to have a license. So now how am I supposed to get to work? And then now you have, the bond issue, if you say that I'm innocent until proven guilty, but yet your first response is to lock me up with a cash bond that you clearly know that I can't come up with $10,000. So what happens to my life now that I can't come up with this? So are we seeing policies that's happening that's adding to the poverty?
Yeah, to Brother Troy's point and to your point about how you have that conversation with the community, because from the community standpoint, from the standpoint of someone who went to high school, graduated, went to college, got a good job, and then somebody breaks in my house and steals my TV or steals my car. To me, that's the issue. Somebody stole my car. But the problem is we have to have a broader conversation to get behind the scenes, as Troy was just talking about, to the root causes of some of these things. When you look at state-of-the-art prisons, but schools that have been shut down, we have to explain to the community who do not realize that it's a bigger connection of structural racism. And even going to the policy conversation that you mentioned, as Troy has already said, the 13th Amendment was a policy. The policies go all the way back to Jim Crow, black codes, slavery. There's always been a targeting of our community, and even from the political aspect of what was called the Southern Strategy, how you turn poor whites against poor blacks. So there's always been policies that have been set in place to kind of keep a certain community, black and brown people, marginalized. So now that we are living the effects of the policies, which is me stealing a car, me shooting somebody, selling drugs. Now, these are all symptoms, but as you said, we have to explain to the community that it's not just as simple as a broken, somebody breaking in a house. Domestic violence, which often ties back to frustrations of not being able to get a job, not being able to be a man, and people internalizing that the wrong way. You're right. It is these policies that are behind a lot of the conditions, but the other issue is, how do you get the community to understand that it's bigger than that? Yes, I have to pay because I broke in a house, I stole a car, I'm selling drugs. But there's a larger scale conversation that those, such as myself and Troy, we know and we understand it because we've lived it. We're dealing with brothers and sisters every day. But there's a portion of our community, particularly in the 80s and 90s, when all these things was happening, what I call the black professional class, who, while this slaughter was taking place, they were comfortable. The judges and the officers and the professional class, the parole officers, they saw all this taking place. But now we're in a condition, in a place where so many people have been incarcerated that it's impacting the community. It's impacting the budget.
Right.
Now they're taking a different look at it. But going back to my point of what I was saying, you've got to look behind the scenes. You just can't look at crime on the surface. You've got to dig into what these root causes are.
But that's the whole society.
Right.
Because it's all connected. You know what I mean? We can't disconnect crime from education, or crime from poverty, crime from a lack of jobs. It's, so it's like the entire society is like the movie The Matrix. You know what I mean? Where we're just fuel for a bigger system. You know what I mean? So you get up every morning, you go to the same 8-hour job. You know what I mean? You make enough money to get you to the next week. You go to the same gas station, same party store. You do the same routine every week. You in a matrix. You know what I mean? You might think working at a plant is a good job, but plant is short for plantation. So it's the same thing warmed over, man. And it's a group, I believe, that understands this. But we do enough studies, and we've seen enough studies for people to know how poverty is tied to crime. I mean, we had a movie, Trading Places.
Right.
Where they showed how if you change the environment of the person, that it would change their mentality and how they deal with things.
Right.
And that's all we're dealing with out here. Black people, I mean, you go into prisons, you see blacks, Hispanics, you see trailer park white people. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to commit crime. Nobody wants to hurt other people. Nobody wants to live like that. But the environment that's been created, contributes to it. So now you have men who have been incarcerated 20, 30 years getting out. What kind of tools do they have?
Right, and what kind of tools do they have? What kind of resources? And then understanding that everything that they once knew has totally changed. Technology. I mean, we used to be able to be on the party line, back in the day. that don't exist no more. So you have cell phones, and sometimes when we go over to Ryan Correctional Facility and we do the training class, I remember, one of the gentlemen, like, he was holding a cell phone like it was a snake. He held it out here like, what am I supposed to do with this thing?
Right.
And not realizing that he's connected to the world just on one device, where something that was the size of this table is now narrowed down to this one device. His whole world has changed.
They come out they were watching Star Trek, now they come out and
to Star Trek.
The Jetsons are real now, and they got on a red Levi suit, you know what I mean, back from the 80s, I mean,
He said she liked that red Levi suit.
Like, man, as soon as I get out, I'm getting that red Levi.
I'm going back to get that red Levi.
I'm going to Northland.
And not realizing Northland not there no more. And then that triggers what? So I come out from being incarcerated for over 20, 30 years.
And those are real numbers.
Yeah.
Those are
real numbers. And now I come back to what? What am I coming back to? I'm coming back to a community that the school that I once went to is no longer there, or is there and it's blight. The home that I used to grew up in is blight, or it's no longer there. Big Mama gone. Ain't no more Big Mamas. The Big Mamas is gone. We got grandmama's my age, you know, hanging out, chilling,
And
but
I'm-
it's a different
And I'm
society.
50 years old now,
Right,
trying to get into a workforce.
Right.
Transition.
You know,
right. And now then you expect what? Like what happens when I'm released, if I'm given my properties back,
Mhm.
and then do we still give them bus tickets?
No, they don't get. What
They'll
you get?
get-
You get
No,
one
not-
bus
yeah,
ticket.
that-
You get one bus
Yeah.
ticket
Well, here's
and
the
like
thing.
$50.
I have literally had conversations with, you know, individuals, and they'll just tell you, you know, when they go back to their neighborhood, they will just tell you it looks like a bomb. It looks like my
Somebody threw a
neighborhood
grenade
was
in there.
bombed,
Mhm.
literally. So that's a trauma on the mind in itself. Fortunately, today on the policy level, it's not like when myself and Troy came home, when we had to be straight bootstrappers. We had to pull ourselves up from our bootstraps.
Right.
A lot of the agencies and the government offices, you know, they're taking notice of it because, again, it has impacted the community. I was looking at an interview by the CEO of JP Morgan Chase out in Chicago, and they were talking about how they're getting ready to pour $350 million into the criminal justice system. And he was saying that even as the CEO of that bank, that they're willing to hire formerly incarcerated people, depending on if they didn't have any
The crime,
crime,
right.
you know, fraud or
Right.
financial.
Can't be duplicating
type of-
checks.
Right. But what I'm saying is, for somebody on that level to take
Recognize,
notice
yes.
of what's happening in the criminal justice sphere, and even with this bill that, you know, although there's a lot of debate about the merits of the First Step Act, you know, you've got bills and criminal justice bills that are reaching the highest levels of government that President Trump signed not too long ago. So fortunately now, for a lot of the people that's coming out, it's a lot better in terms of resources and connecting, you know, than when myself and Troy came on. But it's still a lot of challenges. There's a lot of mental health issues people have to go through,
Now,
which
I
is
would
real
say,
big.
it's horrible. You know, because of
And why would you say it's
because
horrible?
those things aren't being addressed.
Mhm.
You know, and what you've done in holding a person 10, 15 years and letting them out, you've created a permanent underclass. You know what I mean? So we can give you, Chase can give you jobs, JP Morgan, whoever can give you jobs, but what type of jobs are they gonna be? You know, will they be jobs that can maintain a family? Because now you're a man coming home and you have a responsibility.
Right.
You know, can you maintain that? In most cases, the money that they get is not enough.
Right.
And then a lot of these organizations that I'm seeing, the majority, 95% of these organizations are hustles. You know, and they set up and act like they're doing prison reform, reentry programs, and they're not doing anything. They're
Right.
taking you to say, let's
Right.
fill out a
And-
paper, you know,
Yeah.
some paper so you can get your record expunged. That'll
Right.
never happen, you know, this type of thing.
We working on that. We're trying to get these
To be
expungements
clear, though,
off.
to be clear, I'm
But
in-
it's like,
I'm
you
in-
know, it's
yeah.
just like a game almost
Right.
that's being played
Right.
with real human beings.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that people should commit crimes and then just be, you know, the red carpet laid out for them. But I think that different processes need to be created. You know, I think that possibly you can go to like a plant, for instance, General
Right.
Motors, Ford Motor Company can create maybe minimum wage type plants to get people on their feet. You know what I mean? An educational process to
And
get
people
them
have the ability
educated.
to work their
You know,
way- their way
different
up.
things. Yeah, different things like that.
Right.
That's not happening.
Right.
You know.
And just to be clear, I'm speaking in terms of the public awareness of it. The conversation of it has changed. And I certainly, you know, I run a statewide criminal justice organization, and I watch these millions of dollars pour into the nonprofit sector.
But by the time they
yet-
get to where they need to go,
Right,
you
it
get
trickles
pennies
down to
of
us.
it.
We get pennies of it, and one of the quests that I'm on right now is that we need to start being at the front of the table.
Exactly.
And stop being, you know, the group that gets pennies, because we are the most impacted people, and we are very intelligent brothers. You know, I mean, I was the chief of staff, legislative policy person for Representative Leslie Love for, you know, 3 straight years. We're capable. Brother Troy, you know, he and I walked the back 40, and
just runs the whole nation.
we never, when we were on the inside, we talked about being out here 20 years later, but I had no idea that the brilliance that I saw in this brother would lead him to be the minister at Mosque number 1. And one of the things that he told me back then in going into ministries is don't let all those churches and those pastors use your story and then sit you on the sideline.
Yep.
So we're capable.
Yep.
You know, if we get the opportunity and to be mentored and to be around the right people.
But see, we have to, if we're intelligent, we have to take the opportunity. And if we're intelligent, we're not looking to sit at a table, but we create our own table. You know, we have to get back to, you know, it takes a village.
Absolutely.
You know, we have to create jobs. We have to create, you know, different circumstances. I've been blessed recently to deal with a lot of the rap, the hip hop brothers from New York. And I'm seeing that they have a totally different mindset, the way that they approach things. And you look at these people and you just see the big names. You see the Jay-Z's, the Damon Dash, Irv Gotti, 50 Cent. But, you know, back in the day, you remember when you used to get an album and you open that album up and you see all the names.
Yep.
Right.
Everybody's connected. So you're looking at a Damon Dash, a Jay-Z, a Russell Simmons, and all the families that they've helped create or become millionaires.
Right.
I mean,
You know,
yes.
we got to get back to that, man. We have to find a way to break into this thing and open it up so that those men and women, because a lot of women have been incarcerated over the last 10,
And I wanted to
15
talk,
years.
and
you know.
most definitely want to talk about the women because
And they don't have the same services either. And
Exactly.
it's harder for them to get jobs. You know, so it's, I mean, we have to really look at this thing.
So I want to say thank you for coming on the show. I think we can most definitely pick up at a part 2 to talk about, you know, what's the next steps? What are the next steps? Because like you said, you have a lot of organizations who you see the millions pouring in from the budget, from the federal government side, but then when they get to organizations who are out here on the ground doing the work, we're getting pennies. And we're out here actually servicing people.
Right,
and so it becomes that conversation of, you know, do we build our own table? Do we stop trying to get to a table that apparently don't want us there and we create our own table so that we can get our own funding?
And you need better checks and balances because some of those organizations are getting money, but the checks and balances aren't there. They're not getting to the people that need to get them, you know what I mean? So, you know, it's a lot of different things we have to look at and analyze and weigh because if you're going to take it serious, and it's a very serious matter because if you don't take care of these men, then they, like I said, they become permanent underclass, then they become predators once again.
Right.
You know, and I could do everything in my power to raise my children right, put them through college, take care of them. But if the guy next door isn't right, my children can
That's
walk
right.
out and be murdered
That's
just
right.
like that.
Just like that.
Because we're not looking at the entirety
That's
of
right.
this. It's the society has to be
Yes.
taken care of. So each man has, you know, has to be looked out for because you can become the victim.
That's right.
Yes.
So it's a bigger, we got to look at this thing as we're all family, you know, black, white, whatever. But we have to look at the society in that way now.
All right. Well, thank you. Any last words, Pastor?
Hey, I think he said it. He hit it on the nose.
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming to On the Floor with Dr. Terra DeFoe. Again, my special guests today are Minister Troy Muhammad and Pastor Kevin Harris. And stay tuned. We'll be right back.